welcome to Zoom with Czarny. I'm Dustin Czarny, Democratic Elections Commissioner for Onondaga County, and this is my interview show. It's coming to you on Saturday because I've been running a little late due to Labor Day holiday and a lot of office work that's been going on. However, I'm really happy to be bringing you my annual conversation with my good friend Mark Spadafore. He's the president of the Greater Syracuse Labor Council, one of the upstate, I believe the upstate political director for SEIU 1199, a huge force in Democratic politics here in Onondaga County. And we talk every year around Labor Day about the state of labor in Onondaga County and throughout the country. It's a great conversation, so please stay tuned. The Board of Elections is now in full swing. We are working a lot of overtime to get ready for this general election. Inspector classes are going on, so if you're interested in that, please go to onvote.net. You can apply for your absentee ballot, check your registration, register online, and sign up for poll worker classes. So check that out, all at onvote.net. Now, stay tuned for my interview with Mark Spadafore, president of the Greater Syracuse Labor Council. And we're back with my good friend Mark Spadafore. He is the president of the Greater Syracuse Labor Council, host of the podcast, formerly known as President on the Porch, but now News from the Union Hall. Mark, thanks so much for coming back on Zoom with Czarny.
This is an interview I look forward to every year because I could just relax and just say stuff and be with a friend. So thank you. This is great.
Thank you. I appreciate it too. And yep, just like you said, every year around Labor Day, either the week before or the week after, we try to talk and get in the kind of the state of labor in Central New York. But before we get into that, why don't you? There might be some, 2 or 3 new viewers, who knows, who hasn't seen you or talked to you before. So why don't you remind people of what you do and what the Greater Syracuse Labor Council is.
Great, thank you. So I'm Mark Spadafore. I'm the president of the Greater Syracuse Labor Council. We are an umbrella organization of about 50 local unions in the area, representing about anywhere from 35 to 40,000 union members in Onondaga and Madison counties. So we are the umbrella organization. We're not a specific union. I work for a specific union. I work for 1199 SEIU. SEIU stands for Service Employees International Union. And I am the what's known as the Upstate New York political director for the union. So I oversee a staff of 4 from Buffalo to here in Syracuse. And I help run the union's political program, which is pretty robust. So so my volunteer job as president of the Labor Council kind of feeds really nicely into my day gig at the union.
Yeah, and you've been doing, as I alluded to, a companion podcast that you've been once a week on Wednesdays, right?
Wednesdays at 4:30, although this week I got to do it at 5 because my employer scheduled a call from 4 to 5 that right. I also have to run. So, and as you know, sometimes things get thrown at you. Like last week, I was going to do it. Actually, I was at the New York State AFL-CIO convention, so the big state, version of the AFL, the umbrella organization. And what ended up happening was we ended up getting out early, and I was traveling, and I couldn't. I was, in a place where I didn't have a lot of internet, so I was just like, I can't do it. So then I did a live, actually, the next day from the New York State Fair, because we had our big Labor Day parade and rally yesterday at the fair. So, so it was better for me to be there because it was better information because I was showing them, here's where we meet, and trying to show them, here's where it is. There's the expo center. There's the cow birthing tents. This is where we line up, that type of thing.
Yeah. You got to move things around. You got to just do the things where you are, no matter where. I've done commissioner in a car from a hotel room because I'm on convention or something. So
yeah,
but it is what it is. Well, Mark, let's get into the state of labor in Central New York. As you said, you're the president of the umbrella organization, Greater Syracuse Labor Council. A lot of big things coming up with Micron and a lot of Amazon's here and all this stuff. So what what are some of the exciting things happening in labor, and maybe what are
Mhm.
some of the things that you got to work on?
So, I mean, right now, the state of labor, I mean, sometimes you say it, it's like, oh, the state of labor is strong. And, do you really, I can really say it is, it's strong in this area right now. The building trades, like you were mentioning with both the Micron project, the Route 81 project, and then just their normal, kind of work with, the school, the Joint Schools Construction Board, which has been going on for over about 15 years now, rehabbing all the Syracuse City schools. The Oneida Nation is doubling the size of their project. There's so much construction work that the trades are. They're if anything, right now they are screaming for people. They need people, all of them. So like the IBEW, the electrical workers, the electricians, they're doubling the size of their training center. The carpenters who just moved into a new training center is now tripling the size of it. They have to because they have such a need. I mean, especially the carpenters. If you have any carpentry skills, go to them. They will put you right in. And not only that, but with their whole package, like yesterday I was talking to the head of the carpenters. They had a booth at the fair. Their packages with their health care and their pension and their annuities is, over $53 an hour. So, I mean, it's a good life if you can, if you have a proclivity for that. So the construction trades are doing well. Other unions, are doing well, but it's been also a struggle because there's been a lot of, labor strife. I mean, right now up at, SEIU Local Turn United, they organize about, 3,000 workers in the past 2 years, both graduate students, the graduate workers, and also clerical workers to add on to about 900 that they already had there at SU. So, and they're trying to get a contract for those clerical workers right now. So that's been a struggle. You're seeing with, we had a big win with this group TCG Player, which is an online trading card operation here. It was just bought out by eBay, and they're struggling to get a first contract. And the Starbucks workers, nationally they're bargaining, which is good, but especially now Starbucks just replaced their CEO, and some people think it's because they think the former CEO that was just basically thrown out was being too accommodating with the workers. So, and I think what's really going to be hinging for labor right now is what happens in November. And especially when you look at, Project 2025, you're going to have a situation where, labor is really in peril if there's a President Trump presidency.
Yeah, let's dive into that because I think it's funny. Before the switch from President Biden to Kamala Harris as the top of the ticket on the Democratic nominee, I kind of felt like there was a lot of emphasis on Project 2025 that was coming from the Dem side, from the organized labor side. And I think in some ways it was the disaffected Dems were gravitating towards Project 2025 to get themselves hyped for the election and get other disaffected Dems hyped for the election that unfortunately President Biden, you and I are both President Biden fans, but
Yes, we are.
he wasn't exactly exciting everybody around
Yeah.
the country to go. And so I felt like there was more emphasis on Project 2025 in July and early, August. And now it, there's a little bit less emphasis on it, I think. And it's like, and what it's being replaced by with Joy with Harris, that's good. But this is some dark stuff. And,
Mhm.
what does Project 2025 mean for labor?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it would just gut, I mean, first off, the United States has incredibly weak labor laws. The reason that TCG and the Starbucks workers can't get an agreement is because the laws are so weak for workers. And even like, first off, you have to do this kind of Herculean, feats of courage in order to take on your boss to even win the election. Then once you win the election, 40% of all union victories never end up in a first contract because the employer just spins it out, spins it out, spins it out. People, get frustrated. They throw their hands up. They're like, all right, this place stinks. I'm just going to go get another job somewhere else. And so what you see with Project 2025 is to just exacerbate and make it harder for us to even make those victories, but also to just kind of, just attack our institutions. I mean, first off, they want to basically, almost ban public sector unions. They want to get rid of overtime protections so that, so right now, if you work any hours over 40 hours in a week, you're entitled to overtime. They want to get rid of those protections. And they want to basically, actually for the construction trades, for project labor agreements, they want to get rid of that requirement in federal projects. So, I mean, it's just this kind of litany of things that they've always wanted to do to labor, but they couldn't because we use our political power in order to fight off those things. So, Project 2025 is actually an existential threat to all of labor.
Yeah, it is scary, scary stuff, and there's so many things that's scary in there, but I think part of the underreported um, side of that is what it does to labor and what it does to public
Mhm.
sector unions, and
Yep.
and people forget, like, Project 2025 is a roadmap for the first 180 days. If
Yeah.
former
Yeah.
President Trump gets in and he becomes President Trump again, all of that dark stuff comes up in the first 180 days, and it gets darker, folks. There's no sun coming out after that. I mean, they're gonna move on. If they're successful with that, then they're gonna come up with more Byzantine crap to do and roll us back to the
Yeah.
1550s or whatever. It's
Yeah, and
um
especially a lot of stuff they're looking at is even if there's a Democratic Congress, what they could do with executive orders. So
absolute.
because when he won in 2016, they weren't prepared. They didn't think he was going to win. They're prepared now. They're like, if we get this guy in, we're going to ride this coattail, all the way through.
Yeah, because they want to enshrine power. And if you look at it through that lens, everything they're doing is attacking power bases that are not controlled by them. And
Yep.
unions happen to be number one on the list.
Yep.
So we got Micron coming into town. We got
Mhm.
the I-81 project. This is obviously going to be a lot of construction again that you talked about. That's union construction, and in public sector, portions of that as well. How how is labor feeling about the Micron and I-81 projects? What is these are the two biggest transformative things happening in
Mhm.
town, and I think that labor is going to be a big part of shaping those.
Well, let me deal with the Micron project first, because that's, I think, the more interesting one. So the Micron project, right now, I mean, giving Micron a lot of credit, they came in and signed what's known as a project labor agreement with the construction trades. What a project labor agreement does, it's not a union exclusive agreement. What it does, it just provides that local labor does the work. And because the construction unions have what's known as a hiring hall. So, it's not like my union, like where for my members at 1199, they go to work, say, at Krause Hospital, they get their job there, then they join the union. With the construction trades, so the electricians, the plumbers, the fitters, carpenters, what have you, you go to the union hall, they take you into the apprenticeship program. So you join the union first, and then they find you your work. So it's a different structure. So the construction trades are doing very well with that. There's an issue though, and this is something again why I'm a big fan of Joe Biden. Under the CHIPS Act, which is why, basically Micron's here. Let's face facts, Joe Biden basically said, okay, if we're gonna bring back manufacturing, we got to do chips. And so the CHIPS Act and where they give tons of tax breaks to corporations to do it, okay, fine. But one of the things they says is that you're going to be based here. One of the things they say about is that there should be a labor peace agreement, which means that Micron should sit down with the union, not only for the construction side, but also for the manufacturing side. Unfortunately, it was watered down, thank you, Joe Manchin, in the final piece. So there's nothing there saying that they have to sign an agreement. So they have met with the Communication Workers of America. There's an affiliate of theirs. It's the IUE. It was the International Union of Electrical Workers. They were over at GE years ago. So, and actually, they're still there at Lockheed Martin, which is kind of the subsequent places that took over the GE campus. So that union still exists here locally and nationally. So they're meeting, they did have a meeting with Micron. It hasn't gone well. So now there's going to be a public campaign to try to put pressure on Micron to um, so in order for them to have an agreement for the workers that are inside, because that's what happens a lot of times is that the construction trades get to work, but nothing happens on the outside. So that's what's going on with Micron right now. And I'll say this, I mean, we are very happy for the construction trades. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, well, if they don't get it, nobody should get it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that everybody should get it. So that's what we're saying.
I mean, what can we do on the because we're about to get into the political part of this discussion and we're going to be electing candidates, but
Mhm.
what can we do on the political end to make sure that these projects are approved with a mix of county subsidies, city subsidies, and of course federal government subsidies. And you mentioned the CHIPS Act had, you know, some provisions in it, although watered down. But what can we do to make sure that similar projects, when they're approved,
Mhm.
have more local issues that help labor?
Well, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. The fact that, okay, so you have these federal incentives, you have the state incentives, you have these county incentives, all these incentives, and the thing is, like, whenever we give an incentive, we should get something back for it. And not just for the labor side, it should be for the environmental side, it should be for local hiring, and not only local hiring, but make sure you're hiring from census tracts that, are some of the poorest so that we can, basically try to address the poverty issue, which is very stark in our area. So I think that, for us, we need to make sure that we are writing legislation that does that. But, you got one party that is totally against that. And their thing is just let the free market do what it's going to do. My thing is that the government aggregates the rules for the market. There is no true free market. So if we're not writing the rules for them, and they will write the rules, because part of the other issue we have in this area is housing, and the housing crunch we're facing right now is that, and part of the issue we have to deal with there is the fact that local governments write the rules for what can be built, where it can be built. For example, the county IDA was going to give a tax break to a developer to build some apartments in Cicero. The town of Cicero turned around and put a special use permit on that project so that they couldn't build unless they had got the approval of the town government. So I mean, it's a thing where, we need to be, holding elected officials accountable and the way, so that when they give a tax rate, because that's our dollars that we're giving up to a company, that we're actually getting something from it. Because if we don't learn the lessons of Destiny USA, I don't know when we will.
Yeah, and boy, are we going to learn something. I mean, there are so many news stories about the debt load over at Destiny
Mm.
USA, and what a massive blow that would be if that goes belly up. Um, and I don't,
Yeah.
and will our politicians rush to say that? I mean, that's and in some cases, should they? I don't know if they shouldn't. It just seems like the Destiny USA project that kind of came in when I was first really starting to get involved in area politics. People forget it happened with the Bernardi re-election. That was the beginning of all of that. Way before it got to the Driscoll re-election,
Oh
it
yeah.
went on for like
Yeah.
8 years before that. There was all kinds of pictures on the front page of them doubling the mall 2 days before the election, and it just, and really they ended up doing what they planned on doing in 1997, but they kept
Pretty
pushing,
much. Yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
but
Eh,
we are, we're not the only municipality, and that's part of the problem.
Oh
It's
no.
there's all these municipalities running to the bottom to get the crack hit of the economic development without worrying about the long-term future, and it puts us in a competitive disadvantage sometimes as
Well,
well.
yeah, well, and that, yeah, that's you said it well. I mean, the thing is that they pit locality against locality. I mean, for years, that's what the thing about New York was that, well, your labor costs are too high, because unions are too strong. And, actually, there was a good book written years ago. It was about New York. It was about, there was a textile plant in Paterson, New Jersey, and about how a lot of Jewish immigrants were there and Italian immigrants and what have you. And then it shut down and went down south. It was union up north. It was non-union down south, and then they shut down there and it went to Mexico. It was shut down in Mexico. So kind of like followed where the company went, and it just kept going to lower and lower labor costs. So, I mean, this is again, so you got and that was the thing that I liked about Joe Biden. Joe Biden was like finally addressing some of this in the legislation. And my hope is that Kamala Harris continues that because we have to address this stuff. Or, I mean, look at, I mean, I think he even said that publicly. They wouldn't have invested here if it wasn't for the CHIPS Act.
Well, that's a perfect segue. Let's talk about the switch.
Mhm.
I mean, I think you and I both were pessimistic that the switch was going to happen, and I'm speaking for you. You know what? I'll speak for myself. I was pessimistic that the switch was going to happen, and I was doubly pessimistic that we, as a party, would handle it in a way that unified the party and brought. And I was definitely afraid that they were going to pass over VP Harris and just put a rip down the middle of our party that we would never heal from, antagonizing African American voters and people who just and women voters, and really really putting what was a bad situation to a worse situation. I was wrong. And 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 famously so now. I think it seems like I couldn't have been more wrong, but I still think it's like quite a miracle where we're at. What do you see, both from the labor side and the political activist side? What are you are you seeing the same things that I'm seeing over the last 30 days of this amazing turnaround that seems to have happened?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I want to go back to before the switch happened, when, President Biden, basically gave up running for reelection and what have you. I was talking with a union official he's based out of Washington, and he told me that, there was talk about it back then, and they're like, do you think Kamala Harris, and he asked me, do you think Kamala Harris can do it? And I said, I'll be honest with you, I said, I don't know. I said, her presidential campaign wasn't what wasn't good. I mean, she didn't even make it to Iowa. I think I could say that. And but I'll say this. I mean, this is also the person that made, Brett Kavanaugh cry. So it's not bad. Um, and I'll say this. I mean, everyone says, oh, she's from really liberal California. Well, all right, yeah, it's a Democratic state, but in order to rise to the top of that state, to be one of the big statewide electeds, you really gotta, especially being from Northern California, because the population is not in Northern California. It's really in Southern California, in Los Angeles, to a lesser extent, San Diego. Yeah, I mean, so the population is there. So to be from San Francisco, which is, big, but not as big as Los Angeles, to succeed in a state like that, you really got to have some chops and really have to understand how politics works. So when the and so then, you get to the point where the switch happens, and I was really nervous. And I was really nervous with, basically that kind of union, the white male union voter, the construction trade types, or the UAW steelworker types, those industrial, white industrial workers. But so far, so good. And, I try to temper my joy. Though they brought a lot of joy. But I also think the other thing that she did really well was by picking Tim Walz, because I think first off, he's the first union member on a ticket since Ronald Reagan, and we know what he did to labor. So, this is definitely a better union member being there than Ronald Reagan. Um, but I mean, I think that, having him there helps with those union voters. And it also excites actually teachers, because he was a teacher. And, I think that having a teacher, especially because, I mean, you could be in a rural area, you might have always been a Republican, your family's always been a Republican, but if you're a teacher, you care about education, you care about kids. And having someone there, they might be like, oh, she picked somebody who's like me. I thought it was a great pick, and it shows good decision making. And then the convention, I think, was, I mean, I've had people who went who said, oh, there was problems with the buses, but this and that. I said, look, and I was home on TV, I thought it looked great. And I thought they were on message, and they spoke well, and especially they were very smart who was speaking to which audience and how they picked that out. And they put it together in a short amount of time. And I was just really, really impressed with it. And so again, and then her speech I thought was really good. So, and I've been impressed with, the campaigning. I also kind of like how they don't mind trolling Trump, because he is a professional troll. I think that's, kind of good. They're doing it in a way that's effective. I mean, you could tell it's bothering
But
him because of
you
the weird
always,
thing.
yeah, you always punch a bully in the nose because they can't take it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they've been very good at that. I thought one of the other things that was smart was their social media team went on Truth Social, so they can kind of, needle him there. I thought that was a smart move. So,
Yeah,
so far
I
so
read
good.
that. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think that they went on Truth Social and they follow one account and only one
Mhm.
account, and it's real Donald Trump. Like so they know that they're
Yeah,
setting their things through using the algorithm against him, and he is the only person getting that feed. It's amazing.
yeah. I mean, it's really smart, and that's what gives me a lot of hope. And I'll say this too. I mean, for because especially because look, Labor is behind Kamala Harris. The only exception right now is the Teamsters. They haven't come out officially either way.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Um,
you about that. I do want to ask you
yeah.
about that because that, I, we're watching him. He went to the president
Mhm.
went to the Republican convention. The
Yeah, Sean O'Brien. Yep.
John
President of the
O'Brien went
Teamsters.
to the Republican convention. He's on
Yep.
Fox News a lot. I heard him
He
say
is.
that his Teamsters membership is evenly split between Democrats and Republicans, and that's why they're having
Mhm.
time making a decision. Um, you know, how is labor? I mean, Teamsters is not a small union. This is
No.
the
No, no,
the
they're
union that
they're 1.3 million members. It's and locally they're a substantial union. We meet at their union hall, the Labor Council. And I love those guys. So and I think Sean
yeah, and
O'Brien
you
is
gotta
doing.
say that, or else
No, I would say that anyway. Look, I do love those guys.
no, I
They are. They're
they're
anytime I've ever asked them for anything, they've done it.
yeah,
They had they coordinated our motorcycle contingent at the
yeah,
parade.
yeah,
I've
they're
always, they've always been really good to me. So here's what I think is, I'm not a Teamster, so it's hard for me to speak for them. But as an outsider who doesn't know what's happening internally and what the conversations are, okay, what I can say is one thing, like you said, his membership is not Democratic. All right. He has a lot of, a lot of rural people. I mean, especially the local here, they represent a lot of folks, and like they have a lot of public sector workers, like, DPW and highway departments and things like that in very small rural areas. And they have a lot of, rural white guys, to be just kind of blunt. And I think he's very sensitive to that, because don't forget, the Teamsters is unique. Actually, them and the UAW, they are elected by their international president, the big president, is elected by their members. My president of my union is not. You elect delegates to go to a convention that support that support the ticket. So theirs is inherently more democratic than mine. So he got elected in a contested election. Jimmy Hoffa retired. This is obviously the son, not the one that was, disappeared, from New Jersey. Um, but Jimmy Hoffa retired, and there wasn't a contested election. Actually, Sean O'Brien was on kind of the other side from Hoffa's kind of chosen successor, and he won that election. And he has been very aggressive. Like if you remember last summer with the UPS strike, I mean, kind of the UAW strike got all the headlines because UPS settled beforehand and UAW actually went out on strike. But he was very aggressive there. He's been very aggressive with Budweiser locally. He's been, when they had their contract struggle that didn't end up in a strike. So he has been very, very aggressive with employers and things like that. And I think this reflects his style. he's very aggressive. I'll say this speech at the Republican convention was a speech that any union person would love. And a lot of people at that convention probably never heard that message. And a lot of them hated that message. There was a lot of silence in that room. So I don't blame him for doing that. And for labor, we should do that because for us, it's really about our issues. It's really not about the candidates and what have you. The thing that I think he's falling short is the fact that you have a party that wants to destroy us, that you don't have the the Republicans who would be supportive of labor. They're trying to mimic that now, especially your Josh Hawley and Marco Rubio. They're trying to mimic that, but they're full of it because they still support policies that benefit corporations over workers. So, they could try to say it all they want. It's just, it's crap. And JD Vance is the same thing too. I mean, his whole thing is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just interesting, and it's gone on so long, and it was going on before the switch. I think a lot of people wrongly thought maybe right after the switch they'd be like, "Oh, okay, I'm where we come out," Kamala like the rest of labor, and I think there's still big hope from the Trump campaign that they're going to endorse him, but I
Mhm.
there couldn't be a more anti-union uh, you know,
Yeah.
campaign to endorse. I mean, I guess I don't think that they'll endorse him, but I think there's still a possibility of a no endorsement. And
I think that's I don't think I look, I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I think they would rather go with a no endorsement than actually endorse him because I think then at least, if he's worried about kind of that backlash, because he has kind of look, he's out there on this, And I'll say this, there has been, like, I've just seen things again. I'm not a member, but just anecdotally online, some people calling him out on it and challenging him on it. Because again, he was elected in a contested election, so you have other people who are like, so there's a lot riding on this. I'd be very curious to see where it goes. But I will say this though, you're right, they're a big union and a substantial union, but the rest of the labor movement's with Kamala Harris. And trust me, we are doing everything possible to get Kamala Harris elected.
so let's talk about local
Mhm.
elections. As you said, your Greater Syracuse Labor Council, but SEIU 1199 was um, very active in the local congressional primary, but other
Mhm.
elections throughout the state as well. What were your thoughts on the past primary, and what are your thoughts about the fall election for local races?
Well, it's interesting. I know, you and I have always been advocating that we need to move the election and the primary used to be in September. In fact, we probably wouldn't even be having this conversation because it'd be so close to Labor Day. And so, uh, but yeah, we moved it to June. I still don't think voters are used to it. I'll be blunt. It's just like trying to, especially in the Syracuse area where you have graduations happening and schools getting out and people's minds are going, okay, it's summer starting, we're going on vacation. They don't really respond to a lot of stuff. And I think like I think we could see after a few years, like the turnout's what, about 20-25% roughly?
You wish it was 20-25%.
Okay. So it's
It's
not
in
even,
high teens at best. I mean, usually
yeah.
it's in like around 15 to 18%. I
All
would
right.
kill for 25% of the June.
Okay. So basically, well, and so then, so getting to my point is that, so this year with the primaries, we focused on John Mannion and on Chris Ryan. Both, I mean, this was the labor community. It wasn't just 1199, it was the teachers and CSEA and, some of the building trades and our organization was very committed to electing, to making sure that John Mannion won that primary and
And
Chris
both of
Ryan won
them
that primary.
and both of them are former union. Well, I think Chris is still working for
Chris is still, yeah, yeah. Chris,
but John
yeah.
Mannion
So
was a
he's,
teacher in a very
yeah,
very high up in the NICED union as
yeah. And
well.
he was president of the West Tennessee Teachers
Yeah,
Association.
there you
So
go.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, they were both union leaders. So we were, so I mean, for that primary, we worked very hard, and I think that's where we have a value added is that we were able to have a message to, because we talk labor to labor. This is a thing where. we can talk unlimited to our members. When we go, like if I was to talk to you who doesn't belong to a union, then it's regulated. With us, we can talk as much as we want. We can mail as much, we can call as much, we can annoy you, all the ways that we can annoy you to make sure that you get out and you vote. So with John Mannion and with Chris Ryan, it really was. It was doing phone banks. It was knocking on doors and a lot of mail, a lot of and not like that. But some of the unions, like you said, teachers union, New York State United Teachers, they did TV ads, which they can do. They did that on the independent expenditure side. So this is what labor can do: is that we can have conversations, and we can have conversations, especially going into a general election with voters that normally other campaigns might not be targeting, and we can have those conversations. So I think that, that's really where our value is. We can talk a specific way, especially about issues like going back to 2025. You're saying, yeah, it's not on the kind of like, people isn't as high on people's list anymore. With us, it still is. It's a reason why I focused on that in my op-ed in the on Syracuse.com. It's the fact of the matter is that we can still talk about this. Like, here's what's at stake in this election. So, I mean, we can have that, and we have credibility and trust on that, especially now, the polling, the AFL-CIO released, we're at 70% approval ratings. We are one of the few institutions that actually the large American public trusts.
Yeah, and that has gone up.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember politics in the '80s and how anti-union it was, and
Yep.
in the '90s, especially Scott Walker experience in Wisconsin was all part of a national anti-union sentiment,
Mhm.
wrongly. But
Yeah.
but that it was there, and now the worm has turned a little bit, and that's great to hear. So, leading into the fall elections, obviously you had these two big primary wins with Chris Ryan and John Mannion, but they both have really tough elections in the
Yep.
fall as well. I assume uh, Greater Syracuse Labor and 1199 are going to be pretty heavily involved in those races here locally.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, actually starting next Saturday, we start our first labor to labor, door to door. We're focusing on different parts of our geography. We're starting in the city, then we're going to, I think, the western suburbs and the northern suburbs and the eastern suburbs. We are making sure that we are doing everything we can to not only elect John Mannion, Chris Ryan, but now we're adding another union official. Well, he's on staff with the New York State United Teachers, Ian Phillips, out in the western suburbs, whose assembly district goes out into the Auburn area. So we'll be focusing on him too. If we can get those three elected, I think that we can really, show not only the power of labor and the power of workers coming together, for a political end, but also just for, the fact that we're going to have three really good people who care about this community elected to office. You're muted.
Yeah, so 5 years into this, still I do unmute every now and then. But I do think that in both those races, it's going to come down to those marginalized voters, the voters that make, turnout is not necessarily an issue in Onondaga County. I think it's still going to be an issue to some of the smaller counties. We're going to get 75 to 77% turnout.
Excuse me.
If you can
Mhm.
make 1% better and they're all your voters, that's the election in both those races. And
Yep.
that's where unions and especially unions like SEIU 1199 that has a large contingent of people of color in their union,
Mhm.
which is different, I think, than some of the other unions. And those are the people who don't necessarily come out because they don't think New York is a competitive state, but these local elections are
Mhm.
very competitive, and it's the you know
Oh yeah, I work for a
right,
very New York City dominated union, so yes, I
yeah,
have to tell them, yeah, your primary's done. I still have Republicans to beat,
yep,
so and I have to remind them of that, and and it is a bit of a struggle, but I would say, and that's the one thing being with 1199 is that our members are healthcare workers, and overwhelmingly my membership is Black women, and so or women overall, but especially Black women. And it's funny when you get candidates who come in who think they're talking to us like they would talk to maybe a construction trades union or industrial union, and they come in and it's a bunch of black women asking about, things that are very germane to the city of Syracuse. And it shocks them a little bit. And I always enjoy that moment, to say, okay, look, unions are not just what you think. There was a book that came out years ago that says not your father's labor movement. It was a picture of a construction worker, but the hands were a woman's hands with with painted fingernails and things like that. It was to show that the labor movement has changed. It doesn't necessarily look like me anymore. And it's a good thing because it reflects what the workforce is and who's here now. So, um, so I always enjoy those moments when those things happen because it's a learning moment too.
Well, we're kind of getting towards the end of the program, the amount of time that people are sick of hearing from me. But
And me.
and, both of us really. So I like to
If
end.
only we can hear from two Gen X white guys about
That's
how we
right.
can solve the world's problems. Oh
What the
my.
world needs now is more Gen X white guys. Well, although, Gen X still hasn't gotten our president yet. So, I mean, Kamala
Yeah.
is right on the cusp, but
I know, yeah. Well, I claim her because come on, it's close enough.
close enough. We're going to take her. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, we're claiming her.
so, but yeah, what, yeah, I like to end on my favorite lazy question. What haven't we talked about? Or what do you want to leave the viewers with? Or, talk about, whatever. Let us know.
Okay. All right. So, well, first off, thank you for doing this, because it is hard a lot of times. For years it was, you're right. Historically, there was this kind of like, pall of like, oh, you belong to a union. Are you corrupt? Are you on the take? Are you this? Are you that? Are you this, just rough guy who smokes a cigar in the back room? All that stuff. And it's not that labor movement anymore, so so I would say that the things have definitely changed, but I would, and that's the thing, the excitement I have is over these younger workers, and and because that's the thing, those younger workers are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. But we have to win this election to make sure they'll have that opportunity to do so. And the only thing I'll add is, look, if you are listening to this and you don't have a union and you're like, hey, I want to make my job better, go to the Greater Syracuse Labor Council on Facebook. That's the best way to get a hold of us. And, send us a message there. Well, we'll get you in touch with an organizer so that you can, but it isn't just about you. It's about you and your coworkers. It's about us coming together to make a better community and a better world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is way too important. And I think when people when people rag on politicians and rag on politics all the time, and it's what we've made our, by the way, usually working another job, like, both of us are kind of in better, positions than when we first started, like when we were doing politics for free at nights and weekends while still working a job that you wanted to kill
Yep.
yourself at, you know, um, both of us
Yeah.
have gotten to where politics is our job, and that's great. But it's still, like, it bothers me because people rag on politics, and this is how we get things done. This is, if you can look at it in a elections and politics and public information campaigns are about bettering the lives of you and your neighbors and those
Yeah.
around you, and your left or right philosophies are ways to get towards that goal, and that's something that's
Yeah.
important.
And that's why, like, on the local level, I give people so much credit because that's the basic stuff. If you can, make that park better, if you can make things safer, like by putting in sidewalks or something like that, I mean, the effect you have on your community is huge, and so I always give credit to people on the local level. I mean, not that the state and federal isn't important. Trust me, those are very, very important as we just went through. But that local level, that is like where to me the action is, and where you can have the most direct impact on what's happening in your neighbors' lives.
Well, Mark, thank you once again for coming on Zoom with Czarny. cnylabor.org is the
The
website
website.
for the Greater Syracuse Labor Council. Every Wednesday, catch his news from the Union Hall,
Yes.
because he doesn't want to be stuck on his porch anymore. But check it out; it's always very informative. And thank you again for all you do for Onondaga County and the voters within.
Thank you. And again, I love being here, so thank you.
And that was my interview with Mark Spadafore of the Greater Syracuse Labor Council. Always an incredible discussion. Next week, I hopefully tomorrow I'll be dropping a long-awaited weekly walk on the town of Clay. I've been a little behind on those, but I'm hoping that I can get done with that sometime tomorrow. Commissioner Carr on Tuesday will be talking about my reelection and with the Board of Elections. And I was unable to bring you that this last week because of the holiday, but I'll be talking about that and what a Board of Elections is as we're getting into the general election. I'll do a little bit of a deep dive about how elections work in New York State. Zoom with Czarny next week. I'm hoping to have family court judge candidate Christine Albiati on Friday. As always, go to dustinczarny.com and you can get all this content for free. You'll get an email notification anytime I post content or election news updates going into this very busy fall election. Thank you very much and enjoy. Bye-bye.